And if there's one thing that you'd like the people to take away from this experience today, what would it be?
Oh, I want them to see, believe it or not, I want them to see how tough it is being a cook. Now here it's pretty good. You got all morning long to cook a good meal. And it's still a lot of hard, hot work. And if you've got to do that on a trail, get it made and then get home, that's really hard. So I want people to see how.
A hand or a shoe or something.
My name's David, and I was a judge. There was two of us, and we judged the wagons yesterday for authenticity, how they looked compared to back in the time when they actually went down the trail, whether they're a trail wagon or a ranch wagon. Checked all the utensils to make sure they're from that period. We make sure they have the thing that you had to have on a wagon at that period. Yes, sir, it's growing real fast. I started in it about 27 years ago, and we paid an outrageous amount for our wagon. We paid $5,000 for it. Now, we wouldn't take less than $35,000 or $40,000 for it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's there's about 3 a month all over the Southwest United States. The organization for it is called ACWA, American Chuck Wagon Association, and I don't keep up with how many people are in it, but it's several thousand. We look for authenticity. We're looking to make sure that, like the granite ware, the coffee pot should be gray granite. That was the only color they had in the late 1800s, or the time that we were taking cattle from the Southwest to Kansas and Missouri to the slaughterhouses and to be sold to the railway. Actually, they were going to the railway, and they had to. So we look for that. We look at their coffee pots, their eating utensils. We make sure that the forks are 3-pronged, because that was what happened. That was what they used right then. The vast majority of them were leftovers from the Civil War.
Wow.
So you kind of look for that. You could tell which one Civil War made and which one was made for individual use and for the house use. We make sure that all the harness is, of course, leather. There's no stainless steel anywhere on the wagon. So we check the harness to make sure there's no stainless steel. Brass, you could use nickel, but you saw very little of it, nickel steel, but most of it was brass, so you're looking for all brass. Another thing, the first thing that I look for when I go up to a wagon as judges, I make sure that all the nuts on it, on the bolts and this sort of thing, are all square nuts. There's no hex nuts. And make sure that all the screws are in it are slotted screws and not Phillips screws, not cross screws, because the Phillips screws didn't come around till way over into the 1900s. So you're looking for that. You're looking for the wood. The box actually on the wagon should be made out of poplar wood. For some reason, that was a wood that they made most of the boxes out of, was poplar. Same thing with the chuck box. And the chuck box was also made out of poplar, if it could be, but there's other woods they use, and it doesn't hurt anything. It's just, it gives you, when I'm judging, if I see that it's all poplar from that period, I give it an extra point or two. Well, the chuck, actually a wagon has been around on ranches and stuff for a long time. You know, they had the Pilgrims built wagons so they could have them, but chuck wagon thing was started by a man named Chisholm, and he took an old army wagon and redid it and built a box on it and used it to take up the trail for the first time. And other ranches started copying that. Now there's 2 things that could happen on a ranch. If you worked for a trail that went up the trail once a year for 6 months or so, you could hire a guy that had his own wagon with his own chuck box and all in it, the cook. He would be the cook. And he had his own wagon, his own chuck box and all. And then sometimes the ranch furnished the wagon, but he always had his own chuck box. The cook made his own chuck box to suit him and had what he wanted in there. So that's the way it was. And the cooks were real. You see the movies how the cooks are always real great. They were, because cooks nearly always were guys that got too old to ride a horse up the trail. But they liked it, wanted to stay around cowboys and doing that sort of thing. So they took over learned how to cook and took over the cooking job. Some of them were very, very good, and some of them were very, very bad. From the reading and the study that I've done, a really good cook was worth his weight in gold. You know, they paid him really well because that made it easier on the segundo, or the head of the drive, to be able to hire people. So I'll go work for him. He's got so-and-so cooking for him, and I like that food. Okay. Everybody says, well, did they have good barbecue? They never had barbecue. They didn't have time to barbecue. All right. Meat was the basis, and the meat was easy to get because they were hauling it. They were herding them along, and there was always a cow breaking a leg, or a calf being born, something like that, and that's what they slaughtered. And they would slaughter it right quick, keep the meat for as long as they could, and then they'd have to do it another way. The beans, yes, cooked a lot of beans. And that's the very first thing you put on a fire when you got to wherever you were setting up. You put your beans on there and started them to cooking. This stuff of cooking beans overnight like we do and this sort of stuff, they didn't do. You throw them in a pot. As soon as the water got hot, you throw them in the pot. You cooked them for about 30 minutes, as hot as the water could get, boiling and everything. And then after that, you immediately took it off the fire and set the pot close to the fire, just to keep it kind of simmery warm, and let them cook. About 2.5 hours, you had good beans. And so that's the way they did it then. So it was meat and beans. Potatoes was something they could haul easy. So they nearly always had potatoes. And then here we cook 5 ingredients. We have meat, we have beans, potatoes, biscuits, and some kind of dessert, usually peach cobbler. If the cook had time, say if it was for some reason they were going to rest the herd up or something for a few days, he'd make cobbler for them, treat the cowboy. But they didn't get free cobbler with every meal. Usually it was bread, beans, and potatoes, and that's what you got. Of course, coffee was one thing about they did. They kept coffee 24 hours a day. That was the cook's job. They didn't get much. Cook didn't get him a lot of sleep because he was, after he got through feeding everybody late in the evening, then they had to clean up and put up. And so he kept coffee, and him and the hoodlum would take turns getting up out of their sugans, they called them. That's what when your sleeping bag of that time with your bedroll, out of your sugans, and go up there and keep the coffee hot, and keep a fresh pot of coffee on there, because that was something that the hands wouldn't put up with. If they came in from riding night herd and there wasn't good hot coffee to drink, they weren't happy. And if they weren't happy and left, things was bad. So I know that the cook had to get up about 4 in the morning to start and build fires and start things going. Of course, he built a fire the night before, so he just threw some logs on the coals. Usually it caught. And he handmade the biscuits. All right. A lot of times in the morning, all they would make for breakfast was bacon and biscuits. And you could eat all the bacon and biscuits you wanted. And then you took several of them, wrapped them in a cloth, in your bandana, whatever, and put them in your pocket, saddlebag, inside your shirt. It didn't make no difference, because that's what you were going to get for lunch. And you ate those for lunch. Cold and dry and hard, that's what you had for lunch. Now the cook the minute he finished feeding that morning and got everybody their biscuits, him and his helper usually, they called them Little Marys, even though they were always guys, They called them the Little Mary on the wagon. Don't know why. They called them Little Marys, and hoodlum would tear down the wagon, get on the trail with it, and head ahead. Would go out ahead of the drive, and it would have a notion of where he was supposed to, where they were going to spend the night, stopping the night up, and he would go to there along the trail with the hoodlum riding up there beside him. If they saw some good firewood laying there, some good wood, which was real hard on the prairies to come by, he would jump down off the wagon seat, run down there, and the deal hung underneath, an old hide that hung underneath the wagon. That was the possum belly, and they would throw those pieces of wood in there so they'd have dry wood when they got to the next place. A lot of times, and we don't ever do it here, but back then on the prairies, the easiest thing to use to cook with was cow chips or buffalo chips. Well, usually cows hadn't got them, they're buffalo chips. And buffalo has a bigger chip than a cow does, believe it or not. And if they came upon an area where the buffalo had nighted or something, and there was a lot of chip, he would jump down, the hoodlum would jump down and walk alongside the wagon and start throwing them in there so that they would have something to cook with when they got to the next place. And they kept them down there because if it rained, they wouldn't get wet. And they'd have dry wood to work with when they got to the next place. And then that evening, the evening meal, as soon as they got to where they were going, they started cooking. And they cooked, the hoodlum would build a fire, the cook would build a fire, and the hoodlum set up what little camp to set up. And they didn't set up a lot of camp on those deals because they didn't want to have to pick it all up and put it back on and take it back off. Back and like we do now, there won't be near as ornate a camp as we have here. But they get a fire going, and the cook starts mixing ingredients, and the hoodlum starts putting it on the fire and getting it done, and they usually try to cook a good evening meal. I don't know. Probably there's different ideas on it. I've read different ideas, but a good cook would probably get about $100 a month for him and his wagon. A good one.
Yeah.
Now, the others may not get that much. Or if you're trying to develop a reputation to be a good one, you may work for less for somebody just to get going. An exceptional one might get 150. But what happened is that the wagon boss or the foreman or whoever you want to call him, the trail or headman pushing the cattle, what if he decided at the end of the trail they got a good price and a little better price than he was hoping maybe, and that the cook had done an excellent job and helped him keep his crew together and happy, well, he always gave him a little bonus. He'd give it, bonuses were, back then, believe it or not, bonuses were a big deal. They're not like they are now. It was a big deal back then, and a bonus was a real prize and something you looked for and kind of expected if you did a good job. If he didn't give a bonus, come the next spring when he was trying to put a trail herd together, he might not be able to find a cook. So that was real important. This was all part of what his job was, is pushing the herd, was to make sure that he could put a crew herd together. Oh, the chuck box is real easy. The chuck box sits in the wagon at the back by the tailboard of the wagon. And it's however tall you want it. It can only be as wide as the wagon, but it's however tall you want it. And usually it kind of slopes from the front, from the bottom back toward the top. That way the lid on it, or the wagon chuck box tongue, I call it, or the table, whatever you want to call it, stayed up there. But when you got to where you were going with the cooking, you let that down, and then all your boxes and everything, different boxes with all your different utensils, your ingredients that you cook with all, were right there. And the table and that part that you let down become the table to work on.